The Massachusetts Broadcasters Station of the Year. This is Western Mass News at 6 p.m.
A Springfield institution closes its doors due to COVID-19. The latest on Red Rose and when the restaurant expects to reopen.
The CDC changing their definition of what it means to be a close contact. I'm Audrey Russo, and coming up, what officials say about timing when it comes to being around someone with COVID-19.
Both countries were able to gain access to U.S. voter registration information.
And the FBI warns of election interference. Details on what Russia and Iran had to do in order to obtain voter information. Developing now this evening, this week's statewide COVID-19 risk map is out, showing 7 Western Mass communities in the red. Good Thursday evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Chris Pisano. Now, those communities are Springfield, Chicopee, Holyoke, East Longmeadow, Westfield, Munson, and Buckland. Amherst in yellow is marked with an asterisk, meaning one of its colleges has had more than 10 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in just the last 2 weeks. Taking a look now at the latest COVID-19 numbers in our state, the Mass Department of Public Health reporting nearly 1,000 new cases today, bringing our total number of confirmed cases past 143,000. The state also seeing 30 new deaths from the virus. The statewide death toll stands at more than 9,500. As Springfield remains in the red for the 4th straight week, a popular downtown restaurant has closed temporarily. Red Rose Pizzeria posting on Facebook that the coronavirus is to blame. Western Mass News reporter Leon Purvis joins us now live in Springfield after speaking with the mayor about the situation. Leon?
Chris, according to the Red Rose Post, they have complied with and gone beyond CDC guidelines when it comes to COVID-19 precautions. Now, the owners say they're choosing to close until November 5th out of an abundance of caution. During this time, they will do extensive deep cleaning, and all staff members will quarantine for 14 days. When Western Mass News reached out to the owners of Red Rose, they declined to comment. But Springfield Mayor Dominic Pisano says the city is working with Red Rose to get them back on their feet ASAP.
Well, I think what happened is that with this COVID-19, that a case or exposure comes up. I can't get much into that, and they want to make sure that they're taking all the precautions and going over and above to make sure that they continue to run a first-class establishment.
In the meantime, Mayor Pisano is keeping an eye on COVID-19 cases in the city, remaining in the red zone again this week. He says some of the new cases are linked to younger people letting their guard down.
I believe there's been a fatigue out there, and people, once we got to the green, which was quite an accomplishment for a mid-sized urban center in America, I think people let their guard down a little bit. So we need our young people to really follow through with all the public health protocols. That's key.
Mayor Pisano also notes that the numbers are going down, and they're working with the state on PSAs and also neighborhood ambassadors to get the message out there. Live in Springfield, Leon Purvis, Western Mass News.
Leon, thank you for that live report. A change to the definition of close contact when it comes to COVID-19 coming out of the Centers for Disease Control, and now there's concern it could change the number of people contact tracers need to track down after a positive case is discovered. Western Mass News reporter Audrey Russo joins us live with more on this story. Audrey?
The CDC issuing this change after a COVID-19 case in New England didn't follow their usual guidelines for what it means to be a close contact for an infected person. By now, we know that COVID-19 spreads primarily through droplets shed from the mouth and nose, which is why wearing a face covering is encouraged. But keeping distance is important too. A doctor with Bay State Medical Center says health officials, like those with the Centers for Disease Control, are constantly monitoring how long it takes for the novel virus to make the jump from one person to another, known as a close contact.
If you look at the studies that have come out over the past 2, maybe 3 months, we've shown that, in poorly ventilated areas, the virus can linger a little bit longer.
Here I am in my 6-foot bubble here. The old CDC guidance was that coming within an infected person 6 feet for a period of 15 consecutive minutes or more meant you were a close contact. The CDC changed that after an infection in a Vermont jail happened after a series of shorter, non-consecutive exposures.
This individual did not meet the official, CDC definition for close contact.
Western Mass News spoke with Natalie Quitt, a Vermont state health official who studied this jail infection. Quitt says in August, a correctional officer caught COVID-19 from infected inmates. She says his exposures were 22 brief instances.
Taking out soiled laundry, letting incarcerated persons out of their cells for recreational time.
Adding up to 17 minutes total. Quitt says the officer wore a mask the whole time, but the incarcerated people only covered their faces part of the time. The guard's catching of the virus caused Vermont state health officials to warn the CDC.
We thought other jurisdictions should know, and we should share this with them because it might affect, contact tracing.
Now you can be labeled a close contact if you've spent 15 minutes or more total with an infected person within a 24-hour period. That could be 3 5-minute conversations with an office coworker or a student in school throughout the day. But Dr. Del Pilar says as far as contact tracing goes, they ask a few more questions before totaling up the minutes.
We don't necessarily focus on how much time the patient spent with the positive person, but rather what was the nature of the contact.
Del Pilar says private gatherings and lack of mask wearing are 2 factors that raise concern.
Then you kind of get into how long were they kind of hanging out together.
Still, he hopes the new guidance will encourage people to know the risk every time they come within 6 feet of another person.
I do think it'll make people a little bit more conscientious about the choices that they make.
If you've been identified as a close contact, that's usually a call that comes through a local health department. The CDC recommends quarantining for a period of 14 days. Live in Springfield, Audrey Russo for Western Mass News.
Audrey, thank you for that live report. Governor Charlie Baker holding a briefing today on the state's battle with COVID-19. Along with introducing new plans to try and keep small businesses afloat, the governor was asked about the state of Boston's public schools. The district announcing yesterday that they suspended in-person learning due to a rise in COVID-19 cases. That being said, Governor Baker says he expects students to head back to the classroom soon.
The real-life experience and the research with respect to schools is overwhelming at this point that schools are not spreaders. The kids in schools are not spreaders of COVID. I mean, there's no better example of that right now than the parochial schools in Massachusetts. They have 28,000 kids, 4,000 employees who have been back in-person learning since the middle of August, and they have a handful of cases.
About 1,300 high-risk students had been attending class under a hybrid model, and another round of students set to begin this week. The district says schools will remain remote now until Boston sees a decrease in positive cases. We'll have reaction from some Boston parents coming up for you in just a few minutes. We are less than 2 weeks away from Election Day, and the FBI says there's been an attempt to sway voters. What kind of information did they get and how? We're getting answers from the experts.
We have confirmed that some voter registration information has been obtained by Iran and separately by Russia.
In a rare press conference Wednesday night, U.S. intelligence officials tell the American people there's been an attempt to disrupt the upcoming presidential election.
Both countries were able to gain access to U.S. Voter registration information.
Gary LaForte is a retired lieutenant colonel with the U.S. Army and taught international business at American International College. We asked him if this information is easily accessible to anyone.
Personal data, no. That is generally supposed to be secured at both the state and federal level. But China, Russia, Iran have very, very sophisticated cyber attack structures that really have allowed them to some extent, infiltrate into our database.
LaForte explains to Western Mass News how foreign countries are using this information.
The idea is to gain access, through watching U.S. news, watching the disputes, the issues, and then playing off on that through misinformation as far as the internet goes, emails, social media.
He says it's not just Russia and Iran, but China is also involved.
In the case of Russia, their information campaigns tend to be directed more towards supporting Trump than the Biden administration, because they would see the Biden administration as probably more anti-Russia establishment oriented. In the case of China, certainly when you look at the trade wars between the United States and China, you also look at the pandemic, and this administration has strongly accused China as being responsible for it. Then certainly the misinformation campaigns that you see coming out of China would certainly favor a Joe Biden win.
As for the FBI,
we will not tolerate foreign interference in our elections.
LaForte says if you do get an email that you don't recognize, don't open it. He says if you get something that seems inappropriate for an election campaign, you should contact authorities. And remember, you can watch the final presidential debate tonight at 9 on ABC 40 and CBS 3. The city of Springfield welcomed a new class of firefighters into their ranks today.
All duties as a Springfield firefighter.
All duties as a Springfield firefighter. The 8 recruits graduated from the Massachusetts Fire Academy 2 weeks ago. Fire Commissioner B.J. Calvi says today's ceremony is very important to welcoming those recruits, but it certainly lacked something since families couldn't attend due to COVID-19 restrictions.
It takes a little bit away from it, but we have to concentrate on the safety of everybody working and to make sure everybody stays healthy in these times. So it's a sacrifice, but we try to make it as nice as we can for the recruits, swearing them in and still giving it a little pomp and circumstance.
Since their Fire Academy training ended, the new recruits have undergone emergency medical services training as well as fire training specific to the city of Springfield.